Welcome back. I don't know what your process is for post-game analysis, looking through your games to see what you could have done better, that sort of thing. For me, I usually just run through the game review, try to see, do I understand this mistake, do I not? And if there's something more complex, I make a note of it, usually in a text file or something, and then I come back to that game, often the next day, sometimes later in the same day. But now I've got several games piled up in that list that I need to go back and look at certain things. And here in this position, in this game, 10-minute rapid game, I thought I had been behind for some time, and I wasn't sure exactly how that happened. But despite me having a little more space and I guess a relatively solid defense, also I have a few tricks up my sleeve. This pawn is defended, so I'm not worried about that bishop right now. I thought if I could get my queen out of the way, then this bishop would hit that rook. But right now I'm very worried about this battery coming down my h-file. I don't know that I can stop it. Right now, the only thing holding it together is this g-pawn. And right here, Stockfish says, hey, actually, that's not important at all. Move your g-pawn here. And now that I think about it, that's probably a tactic I should study too. Like, if I do that, what's to keep all of this from ending up right down here and checkmating me? I really don't know. But instead of that, what I did was I moved my queen out of the way because I had been planning this. And that turns out to be a mistake, but I still have a very slight advantage. And it surprised me what my opponent did here is move their queen in there. And that turns out to be their best move. I guess because earlier, if you remember, Stockfish was telling me to move my g-pawn. Well, now I can't. And I think the idea is now they can sacrifice here. It's not even a sacrifice. I can't take it because my pawn is pinned. So I didn't even see that. What I did see was if I can remove this rook, which is my best move in this position, if I can remove the rook, then this battery is down to just a rook. It's not even a battery anymore. They're going to get close, but maybe I can stop it. So I took the rook. I expected them to take back. It turns out that's not their best move. Their best move right now is to take back with the rook, which I thought maybe, they might do that too. And then I was thinking about maybe trying to move my queen here so I could bring my king out this way. Okay. But my opponent had been thinking about this even before I took the rook, and I guess they decided they could always take back my bishop later. But now that my g-pawn is pinned with their queen, they can take this pawn and they're threatening checkmate or something. So they did that. Now here is the position that I decided needed more study, because right now I made a horrible blunder, which... Can I turn on the engine? Look at that. I'm now up -6. Not just because I got a rook and they haven't taken my bishop back yet, but for unknown reasons. But it's only -8 if I do a very specific move that I never would have seen during the game. And even when I ran the analysis, I didn't understand it. It says to put my bishop right here. Okay. Again, I'm worried about this, which is check, forcing me here, and then that's mate, right? But I'm up 8.6 if I make that bishop move. Well, what I did was what I had just mentioned earlier, which was moving my queen up because I thought I was going to have to run my king out this way. But Stockfish says I can just play this. And it says they would take it with their queen. What in the... Sorry. Wait, oh, that's just a free bishop. Why am I giving them a free bishop? I thought it was a free bishop this way, but if they take that, that's mate. Okay, I didn't see that. So they won't take with their pawn because that hangs checkmate on the back rank with my queen. But they'll take with their queen, which, why wouldn't they? It's free. And they still have access to what I'm worried about, okay? So if they saw that they could take with their queen instead of escaping this way, now what do I do? Oh, now I can take the rook. The pawn's not pinned anymore. And now it says just they're in such bad shape they're just going to give up their bishop for that pawn. Oh no, because now their queen's on that too. So they would get a pawn in addition to trading off the bishops. But that's their best plan now. Why wouldn't they just slide back and check me? What is there? I guess because now I can block with my rook. Why wouldn't they check me here? And then when I blocked with my rook, they could take the pawn. What's bad? I would block with my rook, and then they could take the pawn. But it's saying it's best to go back there and try to pick off that pawn. If they did this, what would I do? I would just very calmly push that pawn forward. I guess to try to open up their king. But they've lost both rooks now. Okay, so that's what I didn't see here. Is that I never even would have considered this just because I don't have anything protecting that square except my bishop. Once my bishop's there, it's not protecting that square anymore. And they could just take it here or here. Wow. So if they take with their pawn, I have mate. And if they take with their queen, which Stockfish says is their best move, I get their rook because the pawn isn't pinned anymore. And then I've gotten two rooks for a bishop. And eventually a pawn. Wow. Okay, well, I think I understand that now. What if they didn't take my bishop? What else could they do? Well, they can't go back here because of the pawn, because the bishop, because of the pawn. So now they have to leave the g-file. So even if they didn't take my bishop, but they went over here or something, I would, like if they went there, I would take the pawn. I mean, take the rook with my pawn. And then their best move is to take my bishop. Taking this would do what? I can bring my rook over here, and then they have to... What? It says their best move is to sacrifice their queen for that pawn now. Because there's nowhere else to go. Okay. Well, again, back in this position, I thought I had been behind for some time. But I had actually been ahead for a little while. And here, after this and that, I still would have been slightly ahead if they had just taken my bishop. But instead they did that, and I could have just done this. Okay. I think I understand that now, but that's pretty complicated. I don't know if I'm going to see it in a 10-minute game with 4 minutes left. But maybe I will now that I've gone through it. Okay. Let's move on to the next position in which I had a similar problem. Okay, in this game, which was also, I believe, a 10-minute rapid game. I don't see the times on here, but anyway, this was my best move, the move I have just made, and my opponent does what I thought they would do, which is play f3 to challenge my bishop. And one reason I had just moved my rook over here is because I thought they might play that, and now I can bring my bishop back here. If they played that and I brought my bishop back while my rook was still stuck in the corner, then it wouldn't be able to get out. That was my whole idea for moving the rook in the first place. But Stockfish calls that a blunder, or the game review called it a blunder. When you actually run with a little more depth, it looks more like a mistake. White had a slight advantage before this move, and now I have a -1 advantage. And here, what I did was I traded the knight for the bishop, which turns out to not be listed among my best moves. I thought if I did that, I'm hitting this bishop, so they wouldn't take this one just yet because that other one's unguarded. So I thought I would still have time to pull back my light squared bishop. So if I trade this knight for this bishop, the downside is, yes, it undoubles their pawns, gives them a support for this d-pawn. So I wasn't really happy about that, but it would give me time to bring this one back, which would guard this pawn that the queen is pointing at. Their queen is pointing at this pawn once my knight's out of the way. I wasn't really happy with my position here, but I didn't know what else to do. But when I ran the game review, Stockfish says what I should have done here was not pull the bishop back now, not take that bishop, but take this pawn. I will put the engine there so you can see that that's my best move. Knight B captures d5. My second best move is knight F captures d5. A pawn that's protected 3 times. Now, granted, I am also hitting that pawn several times. But I thought, wait, they're guarding that pawn with this knight. They're guarding that pawn with this bishop. And they're guarding that pawn with the queen. And I might feel differently about that if my queen was actually back here and the rook was in the front. I mean, I don't know how that would have happened, but because after a knight and a knight, then my queen's the next one going. But that's what it says. So I'm trying to figure out what's so great about that. Wow, look at that. There's no best move for white. It's a disadvantage no matter what they do. And in fact, it would be just about the same for them if they just pulled this bishop back. Do you see that? That's their third best move, and it has about the same, almost exactly the same evaluation as everything else. Just put this dark squared bishop on f2. Not take this free bishop. Okay, I see that. If they take that free bishop, I get that one. Okay. But what I thought would happen once I never considered this move, but when Stockfish suggested it, I thought, well, they'll just take with their knight, right? And that's one of the top 3 moves listed. Okay, so if they take that, am I supposed to take back with my other knight? Oh, now that's my only good move. My only good move is to take back with my other knight. Okay. And now they're going to take with their bishop, right? Okay, that's their only good move now. It still leaves me with an advantage, but the second best move and the third best move would be counted as mistakes because my advantage would increase that much more. So again, not taking this pawn. Okay, this bishop. Again, if they take that bishop, I get that free one. Okay, so they basically have to take here. And then the only move of mine. Okay, now it says that this would maintain a little bit of advantage, but the only move of mine that maintains my -1 or more advantage is taking the bishop. Okay, now they can take my bishop. That's, well, Stockfish is having trouble deciding. But now that bishop's not hanging. So that's what I guess Stockfish was wanting for the white side. But for my side, what was Stockfish wanting? Because what's going to happen if they take my bishop? Okay, now it's changed its mind. This is their best move. Taking my bishop is the second best move. And king to f2 is their third best move. Okay. Well, I think if I was white, I wouldn't trade queens here. I don't know. Because of that. And their queen's protected 2 different ways, but probably the knight would get it. But what if they just did this now? Then what would I do? Okay, then I would have an only move, which is to take their knight. And now their best move is to take my queen, and a little bit worse is to take my bishop. If they take my bishop, I take their bishop. But then we're still even on material, right? But now we don't have the opportunity of a queen trade, and now they're going to castle long. Their only move that's not a blunder. And I still have a very slight advantage. Wow. All those pieces are gone now. They're all gone. And backing up just a little bit, here, if they hadn't have taken my bishop and they had done what Stockfish said was their best move, was to take my queen, I assume I would have taken it. And then they would have taken this bishop? Yes, probably. Okay. And then I would have taken my only good move that's not a blunder is to take this. I assume they would... No. Their best move is to go king f2. I don't think anybody I've played would have done that. Oh, no, sorry, king f2 to protect their bishop from behind and connect their rooks. Okay, that makes sense a little bit. But what if they just did this and I did this? Now how am I ahead? Now they're only... Okay, now they have a couple of different moves. Rook to c1 to control the open file. Castling, which would put this rook on the open file, or semi-open file. Or g5. I guess g5 prevents me from playing either one of these moves. Or these. Not prevents, but discourages. Okay. And if I did either one of those, they could undouble their pawns. But wait. Yeah, we're exactly even on material. So the only thing I can think of that I have an advantage, this pawn is completely isolated in the middle, and right now it's undefended. And Stockfish is not recommending them to defend it. It's also not recommending that I take it. Because the rook to c1, it doesn't say I'm going to take that pawn. Castling, no matter what, I would play rook f to d8. No matter what they did, that's my best move on the next turn. Okay, but this pawn is isolated and blockaded, and these two are doubled, whereas my pawn structure is much better. Is that what the advantage is? Wow. Again, sorry, way back here. My opponent, this is counted as a blunder or a mistake, but only if I find that. Or this. Only if one of my knights takes their d-pawn. And then we trade off all of these pieces. And that. All of those pieces disappear, and we're left with kings and rooks. And some pawns, and I have a slightly better pawn structure. Okay, I think that's a little too high level for me, but maybe if I had done that, my opponent would have not responded in the best way. Like maybe if I had taken that, they would have taken what they thought was a bishop, and then I would have gotten their bishop for free. But that's hope chess. I don't know. Okay. That's a lot. That's a lot. Okay. Well, I'm glad I went through it, though, because I think I understood at the end why I had a -1 advantage was because that pawn is going to be left by itself with no pawn support, and this pawn is going to end up over there, doubled, and leaving me with 4 connected pawns here and 2 connected pawns over here. Okay. Well, I have one more on my list that I think I can squeeze in here without making this video too long. Let's do that. Okay, here's the third position I wanted to look at today. This arose out of the Caro-Kann defense, and we're on move 7. And I already have a -1 advantage, according to the engine. I have just gotten this bishop out here, and I am preparing to castle. And probably I'm going to put this bishop here, since those pawns guard all those squares. And this one too, for that matter. So what my opponent played here was not one of their better moves. Or not one of the better moves listed by Stockfish, and that's counted as a mistake. I assume they just didn't like where my bishop was. I had kind of liked where my bishop was because I thought even if they end up developing these pieces, maybe I could cut them off from castling to that side. And I assume the reason I have an advantage here is because of my lead in development. I have 3 pieces out. They only have 1. And then they just moved it again, breaking one of the rules of castling. This person is rated higher than me, so I wasn't sure. I was a little intimidated by the, 50, 60 point rating differential. But it looks like they're coming after my bishop. So what choices do I have? I can pull the bishop back here, which kind of defeated the purpose of putting it where it was in the first place. I can pull it back here. I could put it there. I didn't even think of that. But here, what Stockfish recommends is not putting this bishop on this nice outpost, which would save it from that knight, but there's no pawns here that can come challenge my bishop, right? So that would have been okay. And that's listed as my 3rd best move. And my 2nd best move is to go get that knight. Just trade it off for the rook, which I guess would prevent them from castling long run. What I played was here. I honestly don't know why I didn't put it there. I guess I thought they could put the knight out here and end up trading that knight for it, and then I would have an isolated center pawn. But I put it here thinking if they did take, I could take back with my queen, and then my queen would be preventing them from castling. But what Stockfish wants is knight captures e4. -2.5 if I capture that guarded pawn. Now granted, it is guarded by the f pawn, which maybe shouldn't have been pushed in the first place. But sacrificing a knight for a pawn in order to more fully open the king, also that would give the opponent 2 center pawns. Oh, they already have 2 center pawns. Why is that good, though? Okay, so I've captured that, and they wouldn't. It says they would not take back. That's their 3rd best move, and it would be counted as a mistake. They would, right here, they would just take my bishop, and I would take their knight. Okay, I do see that this knight here, the move I just made, which I never probably would make in a game, it guards the bishop. So now if they take my bishop, I take their knight. And then I would have 2 knights here, and I'd be the only one that had any pieces developed. But why wouldn't they take here with this pawn? Okay, now it says that's their 2nd best move, but still that's a mistake, right? Now I'm up -4. I have queen h4 check, which they would... And then I would win that pawn. But right now they're a whole entire piece ahead. I've just given them a free knight. Not free apparently, but... Okay, so now if they take that with the pawn, I have to check. The only way they can block it is with g3, which again I would assume any player in my range would do. I don't think they would move their king out. Oh, it's as if they moved their king out. That would be checkmate. Okay. Well, again, I assume they would do this. Now I get this. Okay. Oh, and then no, I don't win the knight because their queen's guarding it. Okay. Oh, but it says their queen would block. That's their best move. Their queen would block the check, and then I would win the knight. Well, what if they didn't block with the queen? What if they blocked with the knight or the bishop? I think... Oh. Yeah, wow. Look at that. No wonder I had such an advantage. If they block with the knight or the bishop, I win the rook. Actually, it says if they block with the knight, I wouldn't even take the rook. If they block with the knight, taking the rook is my 3rd best move. Bishop to d4 is number 1. What would bishop d4 do? I guess it would keep that pawn in place and keep that bishop in place. It says if I played that, they would play knight to c3, and then I would take the rook. Because the rook can't get away. My bishop's guarding that square. Holy mackerel. But I could take the rook now. That'd be fine. But I could also just put this bishop right here. And but then the rook could get away. Well, then what would I have? I still have a -5 advantage, even though I'm down a piece for a pawn. Okay, now they're going to move the rook, right? Yeah, that's their best move. And then what am I going to do? What's the... Knight to b4 threatening the fork? No, threatening mate. Oh, wow. Knight to b4 is threatening checkmate. Okay, this video went on a little longer than I thought, but that's amazing. And now the only way they can get out of checkmate is to put their bishop here. Not because it threatens my queen, but because it gives their king an escape square. So even if my opponent found that, realizing they were about to be mated, I should still check them, which forces them here, only move. And then I'm just going to leave... I'm going to leave my queen here. Bishop to h3, which looks like a giveaway of a bishop. Wouldn't they wouldn't just take it? It says they definitely would not. I'm gonna struggle to see why. I can tell. They wouldn't take my bishop because that would be made in 1 here. Wow. Okay. So if assuming that they saw, if they took my bishop, that would be mate. They need to play knight to f4. Okay. And then I would take it. And they're still not going to take my bishop. No, now they are going to take my bishop, but I can take it back with a knight. If they don't take my bishop, if they take my knight instead, I have a forced mating sequence. Okay. Yeah, see here, I'm not going to see that. I'm not going to see, I don't think, that them taking is going to give me this, and then this. Maybe that should be in a puzzle one of these days. Okay, well, if any of you saw any of those before I showed you the engine, feel free to leave it in the comments, or I don't know. Hopefully, just working through these again will help cement it in my mind. I think that I am at least partially a visual learner, so seeing these here, seeing these positions, and the multiple ways that the queen can get around the board. And, this diagonal here was the check that led to this position. It's very geometric, and I guess I need to work on that. But thank you for watching, and any advice, any questions, if you need to brag and say, oh yeah, I saw that immediately, that's okay. Some of you I know are higher rated than me, and you've seen these positions before. Feel free to leave that in the comments, and we'll see you next time.